it's true here in Ireland, but outside some churches in the United States, there's a board on which the priest or pastor will put each week as the Sunday is coming near a title for the sermon that coming Sunday. If we had that kind of board here, I would have put on it this Sunday, "You were made for each other." You were made for each other. Now that might seem counterintuitive as you hear it, considering the text we've just heard from the 10th chapter of Mark's Gospel, which seems to speak to us about divorce. But I think it's good for us to look a little closer at what's really going on there. The disciples who were with Jesus were approached by Pharisees. And the Pharisees, Mark tells us, came to test Christ. To test him in a matter, Mark says, of the law. So the topic is not really divorce. Divorce is an excuse for them to have a way to get at him just that little bit more. Because in the Judaism of the first century, there was no doubt that divorce was legal. It was. First, middle, and end. What was in question, if there was anything in question, was what were the reasons why? What were the reasons that would legitimate a moment of divorce? So they're looking to use the law, these challenges of Jesus, in a way it is unintended. The law exists as God gave it to give protection, first of all, to the little ones, to the least among us, and then to invite all of us to come together as one community gathered around our one God. So when the Pharisees come to Jesus, they're pointing towards the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24, verse 1, which says, Moses allowed them to make a certificate of divorce, hand it to the wife, and walk away. This is a tender topic because when you gather any group of people in any church throughout the world, big or small, in that group are people who have had difficulties in their own marriage and may have gone through a divorce, either amicable or extraordinarily difficult. Or if not the person themselves, there may be somebody among your circle of family, relatives, or friends who have experienced the same. What Jesus does in the face of this challenge is not to take the challenge from Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. Rather, he pushes buildings like this are here, why people gather in prayer together. We are meant to be a community of those who know that life is hard sometimes, know that on every given Sunday when we come together, some people are on top of the world and some people have a worry that they're carrying, heavier or lighter in their hearts and on their mind. And this community is meant to be a place where, of all the places you experience in your life, you should be able to be yourself. Not to have to look happy if you're not happy, but to know that the people around you here see you as their own and are willing and able to help carry you through your difficulty, knowing that another day they'll come with the difficulty and you, in a better part of your own life, will be able to help carry them. That's what the church is for. There's a beautiful reality, a depiction. It's from the end of, think about this, the first century of Christianity, the very first century. And in that depiction, the church, often seen as feminine, is pictured as a beautiful woman wearing a long, voluminous gown, and it's opened to show you that underneath, taking in, to be protected, are the children alone in the world, the sick, the lonely, those who have been wounded in war, and the dying. All of them, and anyone in need, has a place in that community if they can't find a place anywhere else. And you and I, as we are here, the times that those doors are open into the church and the times they're not, our lives, our hearts are meant to be open to the successors of those that the church at the end of the first century had already gathered in her care. That's why it's so important in the same gospel today from Mark 10, just after all this challenge from the Pharisees about divorce, what happens? People bring their children toward Jesus to ask him to hold them, to bless them. And his disciples, his apostles, God bless them. Mark is the shortest gospel. If you go home this afternoon, you can read it in less than an hour. And when you do, keep an eye on the disciples, the apostles. You will see throughout the Gospel of Mark, even to after the resurrection of Christ, they are almost irretrievably dumb. They never